What's up? This is Justin, Lesser Dog Tutorials, and this is part 8 in the Retro FPS tutorial series for Unreal Engine 5. In this one, we're going to revisit weapons, but specifically, we're going to figure out how ammo will work in our game. And we're going to figure out how to display the current ammo that you have on screen, and then have that switch depending on what weapon you have equipped. So, let's dive in. So what I did in the Retro FPS attribute set header file was I added 2 more FGameplay attribute data entries, one for bullets and one for rockets. Next, I added another function at the bottom here called post-gameplay effect execute. It also is an override, just like pre-gameplay effects execute. In fact, everything's the same, except we add constant before the struct. Once the color syntax is kicked in, you can right-click the post-gameplay effect execute, go to quick actions and refactorings, and then you can create a definition in the CPP file. The next thing we're going to do before we edit the CPP file is we're going to open the Retro FPS character header file, because we want to add a few variables here in the public section before we move on to figuring out how the ammo will be calculated. So all I did in the Retro FPS character header was add 4 integers, and I made sure that each one was a U property where I could edit them anywhere, have them be blueprint read write, and I added them to the attribute category. Now the integers I created are the max health, max armor, both set to 100, and then I chose max bullets to be 250, and then max rockets to be 20, because we'll be adding a rocket launcher in a future video. Now I'm going to use these as references to the max number because I want to be able to change the max number if I need to without having to go through each line of code and make sure that the numbers are updated. So these are just going to be living on the character itself so that we can use the ability system component to reference these whenever we want to update the values. Now over in the Retro FPS attribute set CPP file, we're going to go through all the changes that I made. In the pre-attribute change function, the first thing I'm doing is I'm creating a temporary variable of the type a Retro FPS character, and I made sure to put that asterisk there, and I called it retro char, and I say that is equal to cast a Retro FPS character in these brackets here. So we're casting to this, and what we're casting is we're getting the owning actor. So if you type in get owning actor with these 2 parentheses inside the parentheses of the cast, then now we have declared the retro character to be the owning actor cast to the Retro FPS character. And you do this basically in blueprints also, but this is just the text form of that. And then we go through and we check this attribute that we're passing in. We're saying if the attribute is equal to the health attribute, so we get the health attribute and we say, is it equal to? Then we say the new value is equal to clamping the float of the new value from 0 to the max health that we made in the Retro FPS character header file, if you recall. So we just take that retro character, retro char variable, and then we do this little arrow, and then we say max health. So we're just getting the variable max health on the retro character, and that will be in place of saying 100. So this way, if we ever want to update this number, we just go over to the Retro FPS character, and we say max health is some other number. And then we do that for each of the other integers that we created. So the max armor, max bullets, and max rockets. With the pre-attribute change gone through, let's go through the pre-gameplay effect execute. So right at the beginning, we still have the float absolute magnitude declaration line here. And then we added the retro character cast, again, the exact same that we did up here. And then we went through and we say, if the data.magnitude is greater than 0, then we're going to do the same thing 4 times, but we're just changing what value. So we're saying, is the attribute equal to the armor attribute? And is the current armor plus the absolute magnitude greater than or equal to the max armor that's on the retro character. If it is, we're setting the armor to be the max armor and returning false. And we're doing that for each one. It's the same thing. So for health, get the health attribute, get health, max health, return false. So make sure you do that for each of these 4 times. And then that's this if statement. And then we say else if it's less than 0 and this doesn't change from what it was before. This is just calculating how we affect health when the armor has run out. And then at the end here, we're returning true. Next, we look at the new function that we created, the post-gameplay effect execute. And this will primarily be used to set the value to be 0 if it is less than 0. And this will happen, after, since it's post, it will happen after the gameplay effect has executed so that we don't have to worry about a negative number and we just set it to 0. And again, we're doing something 4 times. We're just doing an if-else statement here. And basically each one of these is going to be checking if the attribute is equal to health or whatever attribute. And then we're just checking if that value is less than 0. If it is, set it to 0. And we do that again for each of these values. So armor, bullets, and rockets. And with that done, that should be everything we need to do in our C++ files. So we can go ahead and hit this local Windows debugger and load up Unreal. All right, and it loaded in fine. So now let's try to figure out how we can get ammo to show up on the UI. So in the description of this video, you'll see a link to some files, and we're just going to take the ammo icons and we're going to paste them into our UI folder within the textures. And then we can just click the import, and then we'll right click that, go to Sprite Actions, apply the Paper 2D texture settings, and then right click again, and we will extract the sprites. And we're going to choose Grid, and we're going to just make it 16 by 16. And so now that we have these, we can head over to the HUD widget blueprint, and we'll just add a little ammo section that we can update when we get ammo. So after opening the widget blueprint for the HUD, we're just going to hit this drop down here for these 2 horizontal boxes, and we're just going to right click one and duplicate it. And then we want to move it out of this vertical box, so I'm just going to drag it right above it. And then up here on the right, I'm going to hit right align horizontally and bottom align vertically. And then for padding, for the right, I'll do 20, and the bottom, I'll do 20 also, just like the other side. Now for this section, we're going to kind of change this up a bit. We're going to move the health icon to be underneath the health value so that it's on the right side. And what we'll do is just kind of create an ammo area. So temporarily, we'll just add in one of the images, and we'll do a bullet image here. And then we have to set the size to be 64 by 64. And then while we're here, we'll make sure that there is 10 on the padding on the left. And then for the health value itself, we're changing this to be no padding on the left. And then we're going to call this, by renaming it, we're going to call it current ammo. Make sure that that's a variable. And if we duplicate this, we can just make this a /. And then we can rename this to just /. And it does not need to be variable, so untick that. And then we can duplicate this again. And this will be max ammo. And make sure that that also is a variable, and we'll just change the text to be 250. It doesn't really need to be any number. This will change depending on what weapon we have equipped. So for the current ammo, not this, this is the /, or maybe it won't rename it. Oh, it's fine. Okay, for the current ammo, switch that to 0. And then you can kind of see what this will end up looking like once it is being used. So we can also kind of just see if this is working by playing the game. You can see it on the right side there, and it appears to be functioning properly. Now, before we close out of the HUD, why don't we switch over to the graph, and we'll just add a function in here that can switch the visual element to update depending on if we have the pistol equipped or if we have the rocket launcher equipped. So we'll just make a custom event, and we'll call that switch weapon. And we want to add an input that we'll call weapon. And we need to create an enumeration that says which weapon we have. So we'll just go ahead and do that real quick in the enums folder. We can create a new enumeration. It's up here in the blueprints enumeration. We'll call that enum underscore weapon list. And if we open that up, we'll just add 3. First one will be none. The next one will be pistol. And the third one will be rocket launcher, or we'll just say launcher. And we can save that, head back over to the HUD, and we'll change this variable type to be the weapon list. So now we just need to drag out from the weapon list, and we'll do a switch on enum weapon list to see what happens if we have a specific weapon being passed in. So for none, we're just going to set the visibility of the ammo section. So let's create this horizontal box needs to be a variable, and we'll call that ammo section. Compile and save that, head back over to the graph, and we're going to use that ammo section right here as the target for the visibility to be set. And we can actually make sure that this is copied and pasted 3 times, or I should say copied twice, so it exists 3 times. And we'll make sure that the middle one is visible, the last one's visible, and the top one is hidden. And then we can go ahead and connect all of these up, and then determine what happens, or what the numbers and values will be set to, depending on the weapon. So what we want is that icon, which would be this icon here. We can rename this to ammo icon. Make sure that that's a variable. Head back over to the graph, and that's what we'll be using, this ammo icon here, to set brush. And then we're going to look for a node called make brush or make slate brush, and that will go into the in brush input. And since this middle one is a pistol, we're looking for the bullets icon right here, and the size will be 64 by 64. And then we can click that arrow so it drops back down, and then that will be set right after we set the visibility for the pistol section. And then lastly, we need to set that text of the max ammo to be 250. So with those done, we can copy and paste them, because we're going to do the same thing, but we're just going to change the image and the total max rockets. And so the max rockets will be 20, and this is just temporary. We'll probably want to actually pull the max rockets so that if we change the max rockets in the C++ file, it will update here automatically. But we'll do that in a bit. So for the image, obviously, we want to change it to the rockets, and we can lower that. And we are done in this section. So if we play, you'll see it's still there because we're not actually firing that custom event yet. And so let's figure out how that will work. So let's open the FPS player blueprint. And in the event graph, right at the top here, on the begin play chain of nodes, we're going to go all the way to the end, and we'll get the HUD, and we'll run the switch weapon event, and then make sure it's set to none. And then if we compile and save, we can play, and you'll see that it no longer appears in the window. So when we pick up this weapon, it does not show. So let's figure out how to make it actually show up when we pick up the pistol. So back in the FPS player event graph, we're going to want to probably first clean some of this up and add some comments so that we know what's going on in here. So on this first one, I'm going to select all of the nodes, hit C, and just say initialization. Switch that to black. All right. And then we can move down and we see the event tick here, which is doing the weapon bobbing. And then we can comment that and say weapon bob animation. Right here is fire weapon, so we'll just say fire weapon. This is equip weapon, and then here is take damage. And then item pickup. Now down here at the bottom, we can create a new custom event that we'll call pickup weapon. And for the input, we will add the weapon list enumeration that we made. And we'll call that weapon. And what we want to do is determine a lot of things when we pick up this weapon. We want to say what weapon is it, and then when we decide what weapon it is, we can show the correct ammo on the screen. We also want to get ammo when we pick up a gun. So if we pick up a pistol, maybe it comes with 8 bullets. And if we pick up maybe a rocket launcher, maybe it comes with 2 rockets or 1 rocket. And then if we already have these weapons, then it will just give us the ammo. And we can use that ammo in the gun that we already have. So we'll have to figure out kind of what we're doing in terms of finding out what weapon we're picking up and how much ammo and all that. So a good way to do this would be to create a data table. And then in that data table, we'll store all the information we need for each weapon. And then we can use this weapon name to search through the weapon table and find all the relevant information. So let's go ahead and make that data table before we create the event that shows the ammo on the HUD. So if you have worked with data tables before, in order to make a data table, we need to have a struct to base it off of. So let's create a folder in our blueprints folder that we'll just call structs. And then in the folder for structs, we're going to go to blueprints, and down here at the bottom, we'll hit that structure, and we'll just call this st_weapon data. And then if we open up the weapon data, we'll just add a few things in here. First one, we'll call weapon name, and that will be of the type weapon list. We'll add a new variable, and this will be weapon, and it will be of the type BP weapon base, but instead of an object, we're going to do a class reference. We'll add another variable, and this will be called ammo type, and we'll need to create an enumeration for this, so we'll do that in a second, and then we'll add one more variable, we'll call it ammo, and this will be an integer. And I'm not going to save it right now, I'm just going to go over to the enumerations folder, and we'll create an enumeration here, which is in blueprints, enumeration, that will be called ammo list. And then in ammo list, we're just going to make 3 total entries. First one will be none. The next one will be bullets. And the third one will be rockets. And with that saved, we can head back over to the struct we were making. And then for ammo type, we'll change that to ammo list. All right, now we have the struct, and we can head back over. And in the weapons folder, I'll just add the data table, which I believe is in miscellaneous. Data table right here. So we'll add this, and then we'll choose the struct that we made, which is the weapon data struct. Hit OK, and we'll call this DT Retro FPS Weapons. And in the data table itself, we'll add 3 total rows. And we'll split this out a little bit so we can see it a little better. And the top one, we're going to rename to 0. The next one we'll rename to 1. And the third we'll rename to 2. So for the first one, 0, we're just going to change the weapon to be the weapon base. And the ammo type will stay none, and the ammo will be 0, and the weapon name will be none. For the next one, we want to say that it is the pistol, and we will choose the BP pistol here. The ammo type will be bullets, and for the ammo, we'll say 8. And now for the third one, we actually don't have, we can choose the launcher here, but we don't have a blueprint for the actual launcher. So we'll skip that for now. And for the ammo type, we'll say rockets. And for ammo, we will say 2. So back in the FPS player blueprint, we're going to add a node called getDataTableRow names. And that will be the first thing that we do. And for the table, we're going to select the table we just made. And then from the outRow names, so it's going to go through the table and get each of the names, we're going to do a for each loop with break. So that will run right into the exec pin here. And then from the array element, which is a name, we're going to get data table row. And again, we have to select the Retro FPS Weapons data table. Next, we can drag out from the out row, and we'll do a break st weapon data. And so really what's going on is it's going through each row of this data table, and it's getting each row, and we're breaking the information out from each of the structs. And we essentially just want to compare this name, this weapon name here. So if we do 2 equals signs, we can say not this operator, but the equal enum. And then we'll change this one to be the bottom, and the top one will actually go over to the weapon that's being passed in. And I'm just going to drag this up here so it's out of the way. And then from this bool, we're going to do a branch. And actually, we can just link this up straight through so that we can drag it up. And then for the row found, that will go into the branch. And then if it is true, we want to save this out row. So if we right click it, we can promote it to a variable. And we'll call this weapon to pick up. And we can set that after the true output of this branch. And I'm just going to move this down so it's out of the way. And now what I want to do is create an array of weapons so that we know what weapons the player has. So I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call it player weapons. We're going to change the type to be the weapon data struct, and then we'll change this to be an array. And what this is going to do is just hold every weapon that the character or the player picks up. So if you go to class defaults, you can see if we were to maybe drag it into the player section, then you can see here in the, if we compile it, you can see it's in this player drop down here. It has 0 elements. But what we want to do is after we find the weapon that we're going to be picking up is that we want to go through the player weapons, and we'll do a for each loop with break, and we want to find this weapon. However, we can't really compare the array element of the struct with this other struct. We'll need to actually either split them or drag out and do a break. And so I'll do that for both of these because we just want to test and see if the names match. So again, the weapon name. We'll do an equal enum, and we'll just test these 2 names, and we'll branch out. And that's what this will be connected to the loop body. And if it's true, then we're going to be breaking this, right? So we'll go over to the break, meaning we found it. And then the completed pin is going to run. However, if we were to end this, be it through the true method, or if it's false every time and there is no weapon in here, it's still going to run the same completed pin. So we need to store whether or not this is true so that we can check that after this is completed. And so I think what I'm going to do is select these, just these things that we just made, and I'm going to collapse them to a function, and I'll call this hasWeapon. So if I go into hasWeapon, we can create just a local variable that we'll call hasWeapon, and we'll make that a bool. And it's not an array, it's a single. And we will set this right after this is true to be true. And then we can connect it up like this. And then when it's completed, we'll do a return node. And the return node will actually return this hasWeapon bool. So with that done, we can select the input node, and we'll just set this to be pure. And if we compile and save, go to the event graph, it now will just run this, and we'll do a branch. And so now we know whether or not we have the weapon. So we can decide, if we have the weapon, add the ammo, or add the weapon. And that can be just quickly added right here. So a custom event called add ammo, and a custom event called add weapon. And then we'll run these through this. So true, we have the weapon, add ammo. False, we do not have the weapon, add weapon. Now before this actually is working, we still need to use this break on this for each loop with break, because we don't want to keep doing this for every row. So what I'm going to do is select everything from this branch forward. So I'm going to unhook this branch, and I'm going to just select all of this stuff here, and I'll right click and I'll collapse this to a function, and I'll call this get weapon from data table. And then in this function here, we're going to clean stuff up a bit and make sure that the connection from the input does not go into this break here on this for each loop. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the input pin name to be weapon, and the output will be weapon data. And I think I'm going to add another output of the type Boolean and just call it weapon found. And then I'm going to create a local variable called weapon exists. and then another one called weapon to equip, and that will be of the type weapon data. Now the return node is not going to pass in this. Instead, we're just going to pass in these two local variables. So weapon exists and weapon to equip. And the reason I'm doing this is because every time this function fires, local variables will be default. So weapon exists will be false and weapon to equip will be nothing. So it only is going to pass information if it's updated or new. So really all I have to do now is set weapon exists to true and set weapon to equip to be equal to the out row of this get data table row node. And then when this is done, we will break the for each loop. All right, so everything should be working. Just to go over it again, we get the data table row names. We go through each of the data table row names. We pass in that row name to the data table again, because we're going to get each specific row. And if the row is found by comparing the weapon name to the weapon we're passing in, then we're going to set weapon exists local variable to true and the weapon to equip local variable to be the weapon row that we have checked. Then it immediately cancels the for each loop, and then we return the weapon we're going to equip and the weapon that exists. And if there is no weapon, it never finds it, it's going to pass nothing for the weapon data, but for the weapon exists, it's going to pass false. So if we look back at the event graph on what happens here, we can branch from this weapon found and only continue if the weapon actually has been found. And so if we just kind of move this out of the way a bit. Now, if it's false, that means something is wrong and our weapon does not exist on the data table. So false, we'll do a print string and we'll say weapon does not exist in data table. And now we can comment this whole section to be weapon pickup. Now before we continue and move over to the add ammo and add weapon custom events, I want to create a gameplay effect that will add ammo to the player that we can trigger when we run add ammo or add weapon. So let's just go over to the abilities folder, and in the pickup abilities folder, we can add a new gameplay ability. And if you select Blueprint class and hit that drop down for all classes, we can look for gameplay ability. And we'll just add this base gameplay ability, and we'll call this GA underscore ammo bullet small. And then what we can do is add a gameplay effect and call this GE underscore ammo bullet small effect. And if we just open the gameplay effect real quick, we'll just add in what the modifier is, and we're selecting the bullets attribute. And we are making the magnitude equal to 8. And then if we go back and we open the gameplay ability, it's really just as simple as commit ability and then apply gameplay effect to owner. And then we just select the ammo bullet small effect. So since we actually specify that 8 units of ammo are being added to the stat, we actually don't need to specify the amount of ammo here that is being given. So we say 8 here, but instead of that, since we're never really going to read this, we should just specify whether or not it's a small pickup or a large pickup. So we can actually just go over to the struct, and for the ammo, instead of an integer, I'm just going to search for pickup size. And if we save that, we can head back over to the data table, and you'll see that it says enum max, and invalid. So we'll just say that these are small. And then we can save that. And then what we'll want to do is we want to pass in, when we do this add ammo, we want to pass in specifically what kind of ammo and how large of a pickup, because this can be really called from anywhere. It won't just be called from this. So we'll add a couple of inputs here, and the first one will be ammo type or ammo list, which shows the types, and we'll call it ammo type. And then the next one will be pickup size, and then we'll call that ammo size. And with those ready to go, we will need to actually take this weapon to pick up, which we've assigned here. And we could just add a little note here, bring it up here, and break it. And then link in the type of ammo and the size of ammo. And it's called ammo, so we should probably rename that in the struct. So instead of ammo, we'll say ammo size. So now that that is being fired with the correct information, we can figure out what add ammo is going to do. And what we'll be doing first is doing a switch on enum ammo list to determine which one it is. And then if it's bullets, we'll create a function here called add bullets. And then for the input, we'll add the pickup size. And we'll call that ammo size. And if we compile and save and head back over to the event graph, we can drag add bullets in, link it up to bullets, link up the ammo size to the input there. And again, we're going to figure out rockets on a different video. So for the add bullets function, the first thing we want to do is determine how many bullets the player has. So we'll just drag in the ability system component, and we'll get a float attribute from the ability system, specify that it's the bullets, and take that return value and see if it's greater than or equal to max bullets. So we'll get the max bullets, and this is the variable that we made in the C++ file, if you recall. And then we'll just link that up, and it will compare the size of your current bullets to what the max is. And if this is over or equal to max, then we'll just do a branch. And we won't do anything if it is. But if it's false, meaning it is not, then we'll want to switch on the pickup size to determine how many bullets will be added. And if it's small, we need to specify how that's going to be fired. So the thing we're wanting to do is try activate ability by tag. So we'll have to create a tag to fire the ability. So we'll just hook this up for now. And then after this is fired, we want to run the item pickup, because all this does is updates the current UI in here which we'll need to add ammo to that. And then we'll do the pickup flash that usually occurs when you pick up an item. So in order to determine which tag is being fired, oh yeah, we want to do the item pickup here. All right, so we need to right-click the gameplay tag container here, and we're gonna promote this to a variable, and we'll just call that ammo gain tag container. But right before we fire this, we'll need to set it. So if you drag in that ammo tag container, we'll just set this to be something that we figure out in here. So maybe in the pickup section, we can add an ammo tag. So let's create a new tag, and we'll call it pickup.ammo.bullets.small. There you go. So now we are applying this tag to this tag container. We're clearing any tags it could have when you set it, and it's only giving it this tag. So in order to run the ability associated with this tag, which does not exist, we need to determine in the gameplay ability for ammo bullet small, we need to say that this is the tag for this. So in the class defaults over here in the ability tags, we're going to find that new tag we made and just apply it. So make sure you compile and save, and then we're going to head back over to the FPS player, specifically the function called update health and armor UI. And let's rename this to be just update UI, because it's going to update ammo in addition to health and armor. So before we begin actually updating the UI for the ammo, we have this current weapon variable that's of the type weapon class or player weapon base class. We want to change this to be equal to the weapon struct instead. And it's only used right here in the equip weapon section. So we can actually just redo this and make sure that the type is the weapon data struct. And if you change it, there's obviously going to be an error here, but the benefit is that you can split this struct and you'll actually see that weapon class right there anyway. Now, passing in the weapon actually passes in this class again. So if we find references to this, we can actually see that it is used right here where we say weapon base. It's used here in the weapon pickup also. So we'll want to change these also. So in the weapon pickup, we'll change that to the weapon data struct. And then the equip weapon, we're going to change that also to the weapon data struct. And we can pass that straight in like that. Back over in the weapon pickup, we can drag that in here, compile it, and we can say here specifically which one is going to be the default. And it's just going to be the player weapon base, because this obviously is going to change based on it being dragged in. So if we don't change it when we drag it into the world, it's just going to be the simple player weapon base. Once you compile this, you'll see that there is a warning on the equip weapon node, but we don't need that node, so you can actually just delete it. And then we'll hook up the delay to the add to viewport and move this stuff over. And then we'll need to add a new function called initialize weapon. And it will have an input of a weapon base class. And we'll call that in class. And then back in the event, we can use this initialize weapon and just plug it in right here. And we'll just choose player weapon base. In the actual initialize weapon, we're kind of wanting to do a lot of this equip weapon stuff. So what we want to do is take this set child actor class and the interface check all the way through initialize weapon. And we're going to just cut that and paste it in here. And then we'll link up the class, we'll link this up here, and then we'll get the weapon, and that will be linked up to this, and it will be linked up to this. And then we'll add a return node. It will return from initialize weapon here, and it will return from the false on the branch. And we also want to pass out this child actor, and we'll call this weapon actor. And now that this has been done, we can head back over to the event graph and link that up right here. You can delete this weapon because we use that in this function here. Connect up the weapon to the in class and bring this over. And then be sure to hook up the weapon actor to the object for casting purposes. Otherwise, we'll need to refresh this node and select the weapon base, and everything should be good now. So back in the update UI function, we need to fill out the rest of this information so that it updates the ammo. So all we'll be doing is taking the current weapon, and we're going to break the data. And we want to take this ammo type, and we'll do a switch so that we can cycle through and determine what ammo is being updated. And so all we'll be doing is getting the HUD here, and then from that, the ammo value or ammo amount, current ammo. And we're setting the text based on which ammo it is. So for bullets, the top one is linked up, and for rockets, the bottom one's linked up. Just clean this up a smidge. And then we're just getting the ability system component, get the float value. And for the top one, it's bullets. And then we're just converting it to text. Same thing for rockets. Just make sure that it is set to rockets. So with this done, now we just need to determine how the UI will show the correct information based on the gun that is currently active. So we'll just create kind of a temporary solution for this because we're not switching between weapons yet. Head over to the equip weapon section. At the end, right after play, we'll just get the HUD, and then we'll run that switch weapon function. And the weapon that we're going to be switching is the current weapon, split the struct, and just bring in that weapon name. Now for the add weapon section, it's relatively easy. We're just going to take this player weapons variable, and we're going to add. Then we're going to add the weapon to pick up. It's very simple. And then after that, we'll just equip the weapon. The weapon we are equipping is this one that we are adding to the player weapons. And then additionally, we will break and then add ammo. So all you have to do is pass in the type and the amount. So we can comment this and say add ammo. And comment this and add weapon. Now, in order for the ammo ability to actually fire, we have to add the ability to the player's default abilities. So in the class defaults of the FPS player, down here in the default abilities, let's go ahead and add one more. We'll choose the ammo bullet small gameplay ability. Next, head over to the BP weapon pickup because we have an error here. But what we want to do is just remove this equip weapon. And the weapon to acquire, we're going to change this from the struct to be equal to the weapon list enumeration. Once that's done, we can just run pickup weapon on the FPS player. After that, we'll destroy the actor, and the weapon to acquire will be dragged in to the weapon we're picking up. and make sure that you hook up FPS Player to the target. And then if you refresh the node or compile, it should fix it. With that done, go ahead and select the actual pickup that is in the level, because now it has reset what weapon is to be acquired. Just select pistol, and that should be good for that. Now let's test it out and see if this all works. All right, so there's the pistol. I'm going to walk over it, and now I have 8 bullets out of 250. However, if I were to fire, nothing is going to happen because we're not removing bullets when we fire. So let's figure that out, and then we should be able to wrap up this section. So let's make a real quick gameplay effect. And we'll call this GE_player bullet spend. And all that is going to do is have one modifier for the attribute bullets, and it's going to add -1. So we can compile and save that and head over to the player pistol ability, gameplay ability. And in the event graph, we can kind of add in a couple things here. So right after get player and before get weapon, we want to check how many bullets the player has and whether or not they can actually fire this. So we'll get that player, and then from the player, we'll get the ability system component. And then from the ability system component, we're going to get float attribute. And the specific attribute is bullets. And the return value is just going to see if it's greater than 0. And then we will branch from that to figure out if we are going to continue. So if it is greater than 0, that's true. And so now we can get the weapon. And then what I want to do right after this valid check here, I'm just going to move this stuff down. I'm going to apply gameplay effect to owner. And that would just go right in here. And the effect is going to be the bullet spend. GE player bullet spend. Next, in order for it to show up on the screen, we're going to go to this shoot pistol function and click that. And then once it's open, we can actually inject something right after the light flash. And we have this place sound location, which we're not using. So we'll want to run the update UI on the player right here, but we don't have a reference to the player. So we can just do that when we initialize the weapon, which right at the end here, we can get the player pawn. And from that, cast to the FPS player. And then right click and promote to a variable, and we'll just call that player. So with that done, we can drag in the player here, and then we can update the UI. Now let's see if that works. So there's the pistol, I pick it up, I have 8 bullets, I fire and it goes down to 7, I fire again, it goes to 6, and it continues until we reach 0, and then if I click again, we no longer have any bullets. So it appears to be working. Let's do one more test, and what I'm going to do is copy this gun here, paste it, and just kind of move it out of the way so that I could pick it up to get its ammo. So I picked this gun up, and now I have 6. I can pick up this next gun, and it added 8, so that's 14. And everything appears to be working well for our bullets. And just to check again, we now cannot shoot anymore because we have 0. So that was a little long. I apologize for that, but this is going to do it for the ammo section of the Retro FPS tutorial series. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please like the video. Please subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you in the next one.